This is a response to a video by Paul. Got that funk. Hi there, Paul. Thanks for making that video response to me and for joining in the discussion on consciousness that seems to be taking place this January. Thanks to Be Serious. I thought it was really interesting, your video, and I looked at the previous videos, and yeah, it really resonated with me, a lot of the things you said. I mean, the experience you described in meditation practice, which I've experienced myself, but not for a long time, and very rarely, as you rightly point out, you know, where everything seems to fall away and you get an experience which you described as pure. And I think it's a good word for that, for the sense of it. It's a fascinating experience, and I've read quite a bit about it, and that's, you know, that seems to be a feature, a desirable feature of these kind of things. I'm not sure it is really what it appears to be, I have to say. Certainly when I was looking at meditation and space, which I was a few years ago, looking particularly at some Buddhist stuff about occupying space through meditation practices and identifying with space, there seems to be some kind of relationship to that. You know, if you can identify with the space that you're in, or the spaces inside your own body, or the spaces that are formed by the shape, you know, these kind of practices, that can aid that kind of thing. So it's not, which isn't quite the same thing as no sensory input at all. It's just none of the conventional sensory input, isn't it? This isn't the video I wanted to make. I'm going to stop. I'm not going to stop the video. I'm going to stop talking in those terms though, because there's something else I thought would be useful to talk about in relation to this. Because I'm reminded of this because your previous video was about dying, and Laura Layla's been talking quite a bit about dying. Has been trying to get a conversation going about that, and I think there's some interesting things to do with consciousness and dying, and I wanted to try and enter that a little bit, partly for personal reasons, I have to say, because I am interested in dying and the kind of dying of the light, which loss of consciousness and then death represents, is, you know, it's something we're all going to face. And I was really reminded of that this Christmas, actually, because my mother is still alive. I mean, I'm 56 and my mother is in her late 90s, she's 97, and is still alive. Has been on death's door many times. We've said goodbye many times to her, and she's kind of rallied. But she's been in a care home now for many years, for 3 or 4 years now, this particular one she's in, and is, you know, it's almost at the end, really. She has what they refer to as mini strokes, I don't know if that's a real word, on a regular basis, and every time she has one of those it knocks off a bit of functionality. And just this Christmas, on Christmas Eve, she had another mini stroke. I'd just arrived up north where my mum's in the care home, and my sister had gone off to see her. I got a text when I was driving north to say that, you know, that my sister got the call and that mum had had a bit of a stroke and she may not make it. And they'd called the ambulance, as they always do, because she was just sitting and unresponsive. I called the ambulance, and basically they were calling my sister from the care home to see if they wanted her taken to hospital or not. But for a long time, excuse me, we've had this arrangement which Mum set up with when she was compos mentis, that if she ever got to this stage, she didn't want to go into hospital. So they basically the ambulance was sent away. Excuse me. And the ambulance was sent away, and we assumed that she would probably die in the night. But she didn't. She didn't die in the night. And my sister and I went over to the care home on Christmas morning, and she was sitting in a chair, and she sits in the same chair all the time, in the room where the really old ladies are. We call it the departure lounge. But she's sitting in the departure lounge, and she's tiny, my mum, and her arms are like, her legs are like bird legs, you know, really skinny. And she's sitting hunched in the chair like this. It's not a very pretty sight, but, you know, she's a young woman. Yeah. So, and her face, the gravity affected, so her face is kind of falling, and her mouth is open, you know, and it's all heading towards the earth. Everything looks like it's heading towards the earth. And my sister and I sat with her for about an hour, held her hand, you know, and talked to her. Completely unresponsive, really. I think she opened her eyes once or twice. And my mum's got these really beautiful blue, piercing blue eyes. Not piercing, just blue eyes, really beautiful blue eyes. And once or twice she did open her eyes and looked. And it's not so much that she recognised us, because she hasn't recognised me for a long time, or very rarely. And she hardly recognises my sister these days. So it wasn't that kind of recognition, but the lights were on. I don't know if that makes any sense. You could see that there was something going on. Not a complicated process, just there was a person there, you know. You could really see that very, very clearly, just for those few fleeting seconds. Anyway, we eventually left her, you know, and I thought that's not going to be long for this world. And the following day, Boxing Day, I went over again with my 2 kids. I've got 2 lads who are twins. And I took the kids over there. I said, you know, don't expect anything, because, you know, she was what she was. And we got there, and she's sitting in the chair again, which is a little bit further up, just a little bit. And again, we're there for about an hour, holding her hand. I was getting Christmas cards and things that were around the place and putting her in her hand and letting her feel things. And there was a little bit of responsiveness to some of that stuff. And again, she'd open her eyes, and she's always got a really beatific look on her face. You just kind of look out of these pale, watery eyes at you. And at one point, she looked right at me and just said, "You're mine." It was just fantastic. And then went off, and that was the end of that, really. But again, there's very little there. Now, I don't want to romanticise old age, and I certainly don't want to romanticise care homes or, you know, that kind of end-of-life care. I mean, I think it's fantastic that people do that kind of thing, but I'm certainly not in the business of romanticising it. And I don't really want to make it one-to-one comparison with that and some of the practices you were talking about, the meditation practices, things shutting down. But part of me thinks that something like that must be happening to poor old Elsie. You know, a lot of her sensory engagement is gone. She's deaf. Her eyesight is very poor. She can't walk anymore. She has some use of her hands, but not an awful lot. So a lot of her sensory engagement. Her memory is shot. She doesn't know who I am. She doesn't remember anything, really. I mean, even a few months ago, when she was slightly more in the world, she didn't really know where she was most of the time. So no memories, no anticipations. Just a kind of moment-to-moment feeling of sensation sometimes. But sometimes hardly even that. There's just pale blue eyes, you know, looking out into the world. And they just seem to open out into nothing, you know what I mean? But it's a populated nothing. It's a nothing that's got a soul to it, if that makes any sense. There seems to be some kind of a parallel. That she seems to be leaving this world in an orderly fashion. She's left a lot of, I'm fingers crossed, I hope this continues. You know, she hasn't hung on to things, and she doesn't have any of those kind of fears or realizations about the deterioration of her own body, those kind of things. So yes, there's something about that particular diminution of consciousness, or a winnowing away of a lot of the contents of consciousness, till what you seem to have, at least when I look at my mum, is something that almost has that purity that you talked about there, Paul. You know, it's just a raw personhood, just a raw self in the world. Just that kind of drumbeat of consciousness. Just the consciousness. I don't know if that makes any sense. A thing, a person fully aware of I don't know. I've lost the language on that. But something like that. If I was going to choose a way to die, it would be like that. Maybe the technology will arrive. I kind of fictionalised this in that novel I wrote a couple of years ago. I fictionalised a character based on my mum going into a euthanasia station and having their brain shut down in stages. So they went through the process that my mum's going through. You know, they would lose their sensory engagement, they would lose their memories, they would lose their desires, they would lose everything until they became just a pure self. And then the lights just slowly go down, and that's the world. At the bottom, the base, you know, as you say. And if that technology was available, that's how I'd like to go out. Ideally, it wouldn't take years in Dublin continent in an old folks' home. Take about 20 minutes. Plug yourself in. It just shuts you down bit by bit. You enter nirvana. You enter Advaita. You become one with the universe, and then the lights go out all over the world. Anyway, thanks very much for that, Paul, and thanks for joining us in this, whatever the hell this is.